January 24th, 2019. Yesterday, didn't make a video. It was my post-Tuesday recovery Wednesday. Tuesdays are my performance class until basically 11 o'clock in San Francisco. And then I get home, I'm completely wired. I make a video, I write a whole bunch of stuff, and then I sleep in the next morning. And what was yesterday? I'm already so reset from yesterday, so I'm just going to talk about right now. One of the questions that the assistant teacher, Kenny Yoon, asked me on Tuesday was, after all this feedback and shaping the scene that I'd created, which involves a lot of the voices, externalizing and characterizing the voices that live inside my head, which are mostly warnings, admonitions, or admonishment. I think it's admonitions. And disappointments, or just like, well, fine, if you make that decision, then you live with the consequences kind of voices. Not in a positive way, in a like, okay, fine, if you want to throw your life away, that's great. So I had, like, when given the opportunity, those voices can take up a lot of space. Like if I say, okay, let me open the door to that compartment, the flow is very fluent, big, it rushes out, and I can barely keep up with the words that are there. So Kenny's question was, what would it be like for you to throw out that structure of using your own physical voice to speak other people's voices and to speak your own truth from your voice? And it was one of those questions that when I hear it, I know what it's referring to, and it's also a blank space. And that came up last year at around this time. Actually, it was a little bit later. It was maybe around March of last year. I was in the midst of a 16-week drama therapy training, and a scenario came up where we were experiencing putting a chair in the room and saying, this is your inner critic. What is the voice of your inner critic? What is the voice that stands up to this critic, and protects or defends or lifts up the person inside you who's being criticized? And I drew a total blank. I had no connection with that voice that stands up for myself in the face of a critic out loud. I just actually had no idea what I do in that situation. I had no mental picture or model of it. I mean, I consider myself a rebel, but really, I don't even have a voice that says, fuck you, or get the fuck out of my face, or shut up. I don't even say shut up to these voices, because I never said shut up to my parents. I never said shut up. It was like rude, right? And girls don't swear and all these things. So the consequence is I don't have a connection with fighting back with the inner critic inside my own head. I was very disturbed by that. I immediately called the facilitator after that class and said, can you help me? Can I do a session with you? Can you give me this voice, or help me find it? And he actually deferred and said, we're right now in this kind of colleague teacher-student relationship, not therapist-client, and I respect that. I don't want to move into therapeutic realm with you. I was very disappointed by that, because I really, really wanted to find that voice. So that's actually what led me to sign up for the ATP, Autobiographical Therapeutic Performance Process, April of last year, and that was a weekend first. It was just over the weekend. each of us creates a 10-minute improvised piece about our life. And that led to the subsequent 6-month process of creating a full-length show in a theater. And throughout that process, I didn't necessarily satisfy that directly, that urge, that longing to find the voice that stands up to the critic. But what emerged in the process of having to come up with from scratch the material for 40 minutes and perform it is that I became an author. I started making decisions about what the scenes were, finding the scenes, letting the scenes find me again from my buried memories. Actually putting those voices of the scary people in those scenes into form with my own voice, and then performing them in front of other people, things I'd never told anyone before, and doing it repeatedly, especially with one particular scene that was a trauma from when I was 3 years old that I witnessed in my own home, that I'd told no one outside my family, and I was performing it, and it lost its power over me. I became the person who could perform the scene and still be intact and step out of the scene and return to my adult self, rather than being the scared 3-year-old or being any of the other characters. And I think I've talked about this before. So the question Kenny posed is a slightly different version of the same question that came up last March, which was, where is my voice? And if I take what I learned from April to October of last year, what I learned is that my voice right now is emerging in relationship to the internalized voices that I've mistaken for my own, because I allowed them to imprison me by just being inside my head and not clearly distinguishing them, and assigning them their rightful place in the world, which is, oh, that's my grandmother, that's my dad, that's my grandfather, that's my mom, that's my brother, and then that's China, the Confucian philosophy, that's the Japanese colonialism, that's the idolization of Western culture, all of these things. The messages that live as voices in my head have a source, and by creating characters theater that assigns them their rightful place, I'm actually doing that decluttering. It's like a Marie Kondo thing. I'm not even going to talk about her, but it's like decluttering and digging through the boxes to find at the very bottom that buried under there is my voice. But that's actually not even the right image, because my voice is actually the one that is going into the boxes and sorting and decluttering, right? As long as I don't do that, as long as I keep it all like piled up in a mess, I don't have a voice. I don't have authorship, power over it, because it's suffocating me. So suffocating and strangling are two words that have come up many times when I talk about the way it feels to have all these voices screaming at me in my head. And as long as I let them scream inside my head and don't scream them outside, they have power over me, because I'm actually using my energy to keep them at bay inside silently, while going around the world with this mask of like, hi, how you doing? I'm totally fine. I have no issues. And yet when I do the theater, and there's something very, very magical and different about creating theater versus doing talk therapy, because there's a creative process, there's decisions, there's a craft, There's that automatic distance that like there's a show I'm creating. It's amazing. It's like a living painting, but with words, which is so essential to me right now. So the author, the creator in the creative process, is the one who opens the boxes or, hauls them down from the top shelf or out of the back of the garage or wherever they're hiding, and does that heavy lifting of opening the boxes and looking through each item, which are the voices or the memories or the unprocessed stuff, and decides, okay, this one's going to Goodwill, this one's going to the landfill, this one's going to 1-800-JUNK, this one's going to be given to someone I know who could really use this. I'm going to list this one on nextdoor.com so somebody will pick it up. It's like, and I'm so close to that process because I just did that. And I'm so thankful that I've done that process multiple times in my life already. And I think of all the people, business idea here, all the people who have parents or themselves, apparently, on Marie Kondo, we don't have senior citizens on that show. We have like millennials, young people that have imprisoned themselves with their junk. But think about the people who have never gone through that decluttering process and actually are totally overwhelmed and don't know where to start. I feel really grateful that I've pushed through and done that process multiple times in a huge way, like getting rid of 80% of my belongings and then 50% of my belongings. And then, it's an amazing thing if you haven't experienced it, like what physically happens when you do it. You want to just have nothing. And that's why I want to live in a van. So authorship, voice, and I'm just sitting with Kenny's question because it's like, so this week I want to try to write from what is my voice right now. Is she ready, or does she need to do more? Does she need to do more decluttering and show, what's on the surface, like what she's up against and what's in her way? Why don't I have a clear voice? Why am I making a show? It's not just popping out of me effortlessly like a monologue by Lisa Chu, like from my heart. There's like things that I need to show that live inside me that I know are both part of me and also is this unfolding process. So right now where I'm sitting with the question with Kenny's question is, can me, the current Lisa, can that voice respond to these characters that I've created? These personifications of the voices that live in my head, which are expansions of, the teachings of authority figures that I have taken in as a good student and a good daughter and a good girl my whole life. And I think that's the reality. I mean, I think we like to, those of us smashing the patriarchy would like to have a narrative that says one day you wake up and you're empowered and you're angry and you just go smash something and that's it. And then all of a sudden you're a new person. You go out and you're protesting and you wear your anger with pride and all of a sudden you're on CNN. But my story of that is it's been slower, and this is maybe generational, that I didn't grow up in my formative years, like from 0 to 20. I would say 0 to 35. In my formative years, I was not exposed to ideas to a society that encouraged rebellion. Maybe it was going on in America in the 80s, early 90s. I think it was different. I mean, the 80s, we were like totally into materialism. Like it was the consumer culture. It was a different time. It wasn't revolutionary, right? It wasn't the 60s in America. Not that that affected my parents when they moved here in the 60s. None of that really seemed to rub off on them, but maybe it did in their own way. And I'm just that their experience of the clamping down of an oppressive regime is like 100 times more than I could ever imagine. Um, but that's not my experience. So again, so that's where my voice is coming. It's like, so one of the narratives throughout my life has been like, you don't know how good you have it. You should be grateful. You don't understand how hard it was for us. Well, yes, that's true. That was one of the biggest points of contention that really would anger me as a child. Like that was used as an attack on me to say like, get back in your place. Like your ideas are crazy and they don't matter and you should just stay in line. And I was like, I don't understand what it's like to go through war. I don't know how bad it was for you. That's true. And you're going to hold it against me. You're going to say that because I don't know how bad it was, I need to go and have an experience to know how bad it was so that I can live like you do, essentially, was the message I was getting. And it was like, that was one of the things. That's like, I'm going to write that down for later. Yes, can you acknowledge, mom, dad, that my dad never actually said that. It was my mom. Can you acknowledge that your daughter is in a place where, yes, her life circumstances are extremely different from yours, and that's actually why you spent your whole life trying to get off an island and get to this place where things would be better? That's the truth. And yet there's some level of resentment about the fact that your daughter doesn't appreciate where you came from because she can't, because of what you gave her. That is something that is so twisted to hold that against a child who never lived under those circumstances. And thank God, like that's something she should be grateful for, that her daughter doesn't know the suffering that she did. And yet it was something that she used against me to put me down, to put my voice down. When I was speaking up, that's what she used to shut me up. And so that's, what is that? That's internalized patriarchy. That's whatever. There's many, many different names for it, depending on what field you look at, personality psychology, political philosophy, whatever. But the thing is, why was I talking about that? That was one of the things that was used to curtail my voice. And I'm trying to get back to why I brought that up. I got carried away into that. Because I was like simultaneously starting to develop that idea. Anyway, voice. Can my voice become one of the chorus of voices? Can it rise up from the center of this? And the answer, I think, is it will happen in the process of the writing. And I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to see what I, Lisa, currently would say in the scene that I'm writing. But also it feels like the full development of these other voices, just like where I just got carried away just now. The full development of that and the understanding of that is a huge component of my process, because anything that comes through me now as, quote, my voice is totally colored by all of the internalized voices that I have yet to understand and who are still gripping me. So just tuning in, that was what today was about, tuning into what's going on right now. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. What I'm noticing after at my Tuesdays, and as this builds and I keep in this weekly process of performing and writing and getting great coaching, encouragement, like all it is, the formula for encouragement is like, tell me more. I want to hear more about that. Keep going. And then, a few little craft things which you take or leave, but it's more like, keep going, come back next week, tell me more, show me more. It doesn't even have to be the same thread. It's like, okay, what else you got? That is the ultimate encouragement for creative process. And, what I experienced growing up, training myself to play violin and piano was like, the teacher gives you this homework. You've got this score that you've got to learn, and it's just like a stress ball to see if you can get it. And then when you show up at the lesson the next time, you're proving whether or not you got it, whether or not you practice hard enough, and it's all about you place yourself on the altar of judgment. And that was my experience, even though, the teachers were encouraging their own way, but ultimately it was that, because that was the craft. The craft was, did you get it right according to what's written on this page and how these great masters played it on these recordings? And very, very different process. That's not creative process. That's imitative performance, technical, whatever, interpretation. I don't know. It's like ice skating, gymnastics, violin, something for kids to do. But creative process is the opposite of that. And frankly, we do not engage our children or adults in creative process. They're just, you have to go into these corners of society like theaters to get that experience. So what I've been noticing is I come back to my desk and I don't want to fill up my mind in the usual way that I do, which is to like say, well, that was great. And I'm going to ignore that was great because that's not viable. I'm just going to get busy with all these other things that I know are viable commercial things to do, which haven't really been for me. But like, go teach more classes, go do your website, do your newsletter, and sell coaching services that, people make money doing that. And it becomes a lot of mental activity and a pull and a guilt about like, oh, I'm not getting it. I'm not. And then that is like opening a drain on my creative process. So what I'm noticing is that each week that I come back from these Tuesdays, I feel more and more like I'm going to give myself the gift for the next 6 weeks, which is what I have for this class. I'm giving myself the gift of just writing the best show that I can, meaning letting my energy pour into it when I feel that pull, which is every day I want to be working on that for some portion of the day. And that's how I'm going to measure the success of a day, is if I've put thought and words on a page, or even an image occurs to me around the show, or a voice, a character develops by researching something. So that's a very different way of measuring myself. I can compare it to my illustration days where I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this page of illustration every day. That's how I'm going to measure myself. And that was a very great time of my life. And so now I'm back to just relaxing into creative process is my life. And how I make the money to support myself to do that in the beginning is irrelevant. What I really value is the quality of the creative product that comes from the quality of a creative process. That's all.